For your consideration, Searchlight Pictures presenting James Mangold's A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. A Complete Unknown follows the singer-songwriter's meteoric rise, culminating in a groundbreaking and controversial performance that reverberates worldwide. Inspired by the true story, he defied everyone to change everything. The film co-stars Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, and Monica Barbaro. It's one of AFI's top 10 films of the year. Now nominated for the Critics' Choice and Golden Globes Awards, including Best Actor for Timothée Chalamet, Best Supporting Actor for Edward Norton, and Best Picture of the Year. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special Saturday episode as we wrap up the year in the very busy first leg of award season. I'm Katey Rich. This is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. And today I'm joined again by Tyler Coates, a previous guest on this podcast and currently the author of the Considerations award season column for Filmmaker magazine. Welcome back, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's especially a pleasure to have you today because I think when you get the Oscar shortlists out, it's something that a very small subset of awards obsessives can really get into. It's not like it's so obscure. It's an official Oscar shortlist, but understanding why these lists exist, what they accomplish, like it's the 1% of the awards pundits, I feel like, can jump in on this, and you're
Absolutely.
Certainly part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I did not really even know that the shortlist existed until I started on this beat maybe 6 years ago. So, I mean, in the mainstream publications don't care, as they probably shouldn't. But
well, it is kind of confusing too, because you're like, well, it's not the Oscar nominations; it's like the pre-Oscar nominations, and not every branch does it. So we have shortlists in makeup and hairstyling, but not in costumes. And there's 20 songs, but only 10 visual effects. Like every branch has their own rules.
Yeah, there's like 20 original scores this year.
Oh, that's
which
right.
I think is
20 original scores.
I think is. Too many. I think usually it's about 10 to 15. I mean, I assume it's always based on the number of submissions, sort of in how, looking at the Emmys, like, there's no rhyme or reason to like why categories have 6 nominees versus 8, really. But the rhyme or reason really is just like, it's I guess a percentage of how many submissions there are. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of a reminder that the Academy is this large group and everyone's voting on Best Picture. But these individual branches is kind of like a state governments kind of thing where everyone's going to do it differently. They all got their own quirks and oddities. And that's really where it comes out in these short lists.
That is a really good metaphor. I love that.
It all comes down to government and how it all works. So before we get into the nitty gritty of who made these lists, I mean, let's talk about what we've learned in our own journeys of covering award season. Like, why do these short lists matter? What can you learn from them, even if you're just someone who wants to know what's going to win Best Picture? Like, what do the short lists tell us every year?
I mean, they have less and less to do with like the main, I would say the top 5 of picture director or picture actors and then directing and screenwriting. I think it's really below the line stuff that's really interesting. It's helpful, I think, for lay people who know nothing about visual effects, who know nothing about sound design, to have the experts sort of cull down the endless amount of submissions and basically make their recommendations for what their branches should be voting for.
Yeah.
And of course, with visual effects, like basically the 10 finalists are invited to a bake-off where they get to just basically come and say, look at the work we did. And we can kind of, it's their chance to campaign, essentially.
Makeup and hairstyling does a bake-off as well, where they have like a big in-person event.
Yeah, which I think is fun because, outside of the trades, those people don't really get to campaign so much in terms of like talking about their work. And I think the craftspeople are the most interesting people.
Oh,
sometimes
for sure.
more interesting than actors. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting process to have experts in their field kind of make their recommendations for the larger branches.
Yeah, because even if you're, obviously if you're in makeup and hairstyling, like you are a makeup artist, a hairstylist, you have expertise, but the kind of eternal problem with the Oscars as opposed to even like the critics groups is these are working professionals. Like they don't always have time to have seen all of the movies with good makeup. So it's such a huge advantage in these categories to really surface the best stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I encounter a lot when I talk to normals who don't devote their lives to this insanity is that the Academy is made up of 10,000 people. And like, you know, even when I say normals, I'm talking about like entertainment journalists who don't work at awards.
Yeah.
Entertainment journalists whose job it is to watch every single TV show and every single movie to cover it.
Yeah.
And so like, obviously people like us have like way crazy broad knowledge of what's out there. But again, as you say, like, for example, all of these Oscar contenders are so busy, they don't have time to watch their competition. Like, I mean, I think if you're going to be on a round table or variety of actors on actors, like, you're going to watch the movies that you're going to be talking about. You're going to ask for those links. But that's the thing. Like, they can't go to a screening. They can't go to a movie. They have to go to their own stuff. They're doing multiple events a night. And other actors are working. I mean, directors are working. Like, they're not taking, this is not their job to watch 90 movies
like,
a year.
Imagine you're like Brady Corbet and you're running around the world, like talking about The Brutalist at every opportunity you get. Like, when are you going to sit down and watch Amelia Perez? Like, it's,
exactly.
He probably, like, not to like single out, he may have seen it, but like, if you have a movie in the race, like, you're not just like getting your next movie made, you're promoting it endlessly. It's really a crazy ask.
Yeah, I mean, I remember people like, I remember Martin Scorsese during the Irishman year saying that he hadn't seen Joker yet. And people were like,
did he produce Joker?
He did produce Joker. I mean, he was like, I mean, he wasn't a PGA mark, but you know. But, you know, again, like, he was making a 3.5-hour movie his own. Like,
and he's in his 80s.
And he's in his 80s.
Let the man take a nap.
Yeah, like, he'll get around to Joker when the checks start coming in.
Yeah, I mean, the question maybe to ask at some point is, like, why more categories don't have short lists. Like, I don't really know the history of how these emerged for these and why, like, the costume designers don't have one.
Same. And I think it would be helpful. You know, I think it's also helpful for, like, editing. Like, because, again, I think sometimes once the Best Editing Award gets handed out, we realize that the general Academy members may not understand what editing means.
It's hard to understand what editing is. Absolutely.
So I think people are just like, oh, well, if it's over 3 hours, it was badly edited. And that's a little bit more complicated than that. But no, I agree. I think I kind of love, and look, I mean, I think we're going to talk about the documentary branch because they're a wild bunch.
Wild ride every year.
But I love it. I love that. I love that there are people who are like, we're sticking to our guns. Like, we are controlling what's going to be nominated. And that's how the system is set up. There are bylaws in place for this reason. And I think that's cool. I love it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I actually want to go back and disagree a little bit with what you said about how this doesn't tell us a lot about the Best Picture race, because I think, you know, the most famous version of this is in 2022 when All Quiet on the Western Front shows up in all these shortlist categories, and everyone says, oh my God, they're really paying attention to this movie. Nothing that dramatic happened this year. I don't think has happened since then. But, you know, say looking at this year, as you see like Amelia Perez showing up in kind of all of the crafts categories where it could, including makeup, 2 songs. I think it showed up for score.
It did, yeah.
So you're saying like, okay, that is strong. That's where we thought it might be. And then on the other hand, the substance, which I had been kind of wondering about its strength, only makes it in there in makeup, which is where I'm personally, I think it will win. So there is some like tea leaf reading, even if it's not nearly as dramatic as, you know, it has been in previous years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, there are some prizes that kind of pop up. And then, of course, Amelia Perez getting every single shortlist mention doesn't surprise me. I think that you know, I mean, at this point, I feel like I've publicly said I'm a Amelia skeptic. So I'm just going to like take the anger that comes my way from the people who will be mad. But, you know, I think that Netflix is certainly happy about that. But, you know, I still think that Amelia is sort of on the cusp of Best Picture.
That's been the question about it is like the social media backlash has been strong. I think a lot of people who know Academy members are like, look, it's screening really well. Like, assuming that Twitter or whatever Twitter is now is the Academy is always a false thing. And this feels like kind of the most solid evidence we've had. Like, the Golden Globes were one piece of evidence, and this is another one that it's like, you know, the Tyler Coates, Amelia Perez skeptics are not as legion in the Academy as they are on the internet.
But we also don't know that. I mean, because, again, these are small bodies of people who are voting. These are not the 10,000 strong Academy members. Yeah. So I think that that's where it gets interesting. You know, I think that there's no way to poll that, you know? There's no way to, like, be Nate Silver and realistically figure out what people are thinking. It's just based on vibes and what we have heard from the Academy members in our lives. Yeah. Who, you know, I don't know anyone. I guess I know a couple people who are, you know, because the international shortlist is, you know, they've the branches open it up to all the Academy members. So if you're an Academy member, you can just say, I want to be a part of this committee that picks the shortlists, and you are basically assigned a specific number of films that you have to agree to watch. Of course, you can watch all of the contenders' submissions that are outside of that list, but I think Amelia's strong enough to be shortlisted. I think it's based on math whether or not it gets Best Picture.
Sure.
But it just seems like a lot of these things are just sort of like, well, yeah, of course, The Substance is a hair and makeup shortlisted candidate,
Yeah.
you know, and like, of course, these songs or the Atticus
We'll get
Ross
to
and Trent
songs, don't worry.
Reznor, like these are things are going to land there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I don't think it's that surprising because, of course, there's also so many mentions, which is also
like, when you have like 20 films in the category.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'm still a little skeptical. I think that the professional guilds give us an idea of what the eventual nominees and eventual winners will be, but it's harder to base the Best Picture race on the craft categories, even as close as we are, even like a week before voting, I would say that that's true.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go into some of what we have on this year's list. And we can start with international features since we were talking about Amelia Perez. As you said, it's kind of members from all branches, which is an interesting way to gauge taste. And, there are some years when you get to the short list and there are these shocking omissions and people are kind of tearing their hair out. That could very well still happen with the actual nominations. But this list seems to hit pretty much all the big ones that we knew would be eligible here.
Yeah. I mean, I think See the Sacred Fig and I'm scrolling up. Sorry.
I'm Still Here from Brazil. That's my real horse in this race.
Yes.
I love that movie.
I love that
Walter
as
Salles.
well. Vermiglio, I still haven't seen, but I've heard is incredible. I mean, it's also interesting because we have Flo and Dahomey, which one's animated and one is a documentary, and Dahomey also was listed in the documentary shortlist.
Yep.
I think that a lot of these films were things that people expected. I mean, obviously, India's Gambit didn't work out.
Yeah, and India did not submit All We Imagine Is Light, which has been winning a lot of the international feature prizes from critics groups, which don't have to play by the Academy's like pretty complicated rules about international submissions. I don't know how much we want to get into it, but it does. Every year you get a situation like that where a country did not submit what is kind of obviously their standout film,
which is their second time that they've done this in recent years. They did the same
India
thing with RRR. Yeah,
and last year was Anatomy of a Fall, which then kind of goes and gets nominated in a bunch of other places.
Which I think, if anything, being snubbed on a short list could help All We Imagine Is Light. I mean, it can't be nominated that, but like so many people are really rallying behind it that I wouldn't be. I think it's sort of a dark horse as like the international contender in Best Picture.
Yeah,
because,
or on Best Director for Payal Kapadia.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think that is when you have something like that, people rally around it because of the glaring omission that happens so early.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think for international, I would say like this is a really, really strong group.
Yeah.
Amelia Perez, I think, is the most high profile. Again, Netflix has spent the money to make it high profile, so I think that helps.
Yeah.
Obviously, Neon doesn't have the money to spend on See the Sacred Fig in the same way. Mubi does not have the money to support Dahomey that way. So I think that's really interesting, and I don't know what to make of it yet because, again, it's a very strong group. There are more than 5 films here that I think could be feasibly nominated. So again, it just comes down to the voting process, which we can't really predict.
Yeah, and it still feels like Amelia Perez is going to have the pole position once we have the full list of nominees. But who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the thing I've been saying about Amelia is that yes, there's kind of a backlash from the trans community, but there has also been a backlash from Spanish speakers. Eugenio Derbez made a lot of really surprised people when he came for Selena Gomez. He also kind of called out the fact that like this white French man who doesn't speak Spanish made a movie about Mexico. He's not the first person I've heard say that. He's just the first person I heard say that publicly. So that's what I don't know how to gauge is how much of that conversation is happening. Yeah. Like that I'm not privy to because I've heard bits and pieces of it.
I did interview Javier Bardem for an upcoming episode of this podcast and he loved Amelia Perez. He told me. So there's one Spanish speaker.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, look. I mean, until the Golden Globes, really, it hadn't really found its footing in the way that I think a lot of people expected it to, other than the European Film Awards, which I think in a normal year we would not. I don't really consider them to be.
Yeah, but the more European the Academy gets, the more interesting it is.
Juliette Binoche was like the head of that union or whatever. So I think that there is actually overlap there where there isn't overlap between the Academy and the Golden Globes members who are like 300 people. So that's always where I'm thinking is just like, is there actual overlap between these voters? Because I think that matters more than just like being able to say it swept the film awards of this place, you know?
Let's jump up to documentary feature nominees, which you were talking about, which distributors have the money to back their international contenders. And what's interesting in documentary, I'm going to hopefully not get all my facts wrong, but there's a good number of high profile docs that don't have distributors, like very famously. Union, which is about Amazon warehouse union organizing, has been self-distributed, as has No Other Land, which was not Palestine's international feature submission, even though they're in there as well. I feel like that's a pretty major accomplishment that, like you were saying, the documentary branch is very specific. They really go for underdogs. If you are a high-profile Oscar-winning documentarian, they very often would be like, nope, you can't be part of this.
You've had your shot.
Yes. There's not really too many like heavy hitter documentary filmmakers in the mix this year, so there weren't big omissions like that.
Yeah, I mean, Errol Morris at this point, they're just sort of like, oh, you're doing another thing? Good for you.
Yeah, well, Separated, that was a whole thing where like it was delayed till after the election. Like that was a mess. I mean, Will and Harper, I think, was the one we were kind of wondering if it would get smacked down. Josh Greenbaum is not like a, award-winning documentarian, but it's kind of the token celebrity in the mix. But it made it in, which I was really glad to see. I really like Will and Harper.
Yeah, I mean, that one was one that I was really interested in because, and I wrote about this like kind of in the context of American Symphony last year, is that,
which made the short list but wasn't nominated.
Yeah,
right?
and won PGA. I mean, I think if it had been nominated, it absolutely would have won Best Documentary. And I think that, Will and Harper, I think, is the documentary most people can recognize probably because
there's
of
not like
stars
a big hit documentary this year.
And like it was a Netflix release. But I think that, I think what is going for it is, we talked about the election weeks ago, and I think that the themes of being trans in America right now, I think could help its case.
Yeah.
Again, as the Academy gets more European, like SNL is not something anyone cares about outside of America, really.
I thought we were talking about Saturday Night for a second.
Well, that too,
Will Ferrell.
But Will Ferrell, I mean, I don't, is he a global superstar? I don't know.
Yeah, it was at one point, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, and again, it's very contrived, it's very produced, which it has to be for this kind of film, and I'm not using that as an insult to it, but I think that the branch does not want to celebrate that sort of filmmaking.
Yeah, but it's hard to know, what has the edge then in this case in terms of something being topical and more quote unquote authentic? Like No Other Land, I think, is the answer, right?
I think No Other Land is going to get in there. I think that I would be really impressed if Union does. But last year, To Catch a Tiger or To Kill a Tiger did not have distribution.
Yes.
And, I think that last year's documentary roundup, I will keep saying, was more international than the international category was because it was so European focused.
Yeah.
And I feel like what the documentary branch is really doing well at in the last few years is really just like uplifting films and filmmakers and stories from places that are just really underrepresented in film right now, especially mainstream film.
Yeah. So that's a Dahomey, maybe an argument for that film in here.
Yeah. And I think, and again, like Maddie Diop, I think that's how you say her last name. I'm not sure.
Diop,
but
yeah, I think so.
Diop, she's an actor. She's made one feature film as a narrative feature. And this is sort of like, this bleeds the line, I think, which also kind of makes it a little weird as a best documentary nominee, I think, because a lot of it, again, it's a little contrived, it's a little staged, and it's also very short. I mean, I love a 60-something minute documentary, but yeah, it might feel a little fleeting to people. So I don't know. Those are things that I think about, because again, like we have to think about the psychology of voting and how other people are different than us, which is sometimes hard for people to do. Two
of the titles in the doc shortlist that I have big distribution, but I loved Netflix's Daughters. I feel like that got such a quiet release. I don't really know why. Like, it's just one of those like heartrending movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then
That is
also
my favorite of the year, I would say, in the docs.
Yeah, maybe mine too, but also Sugarcane, which has Nat Geo behind it, is really wonderful and kind of an interesting counterpoint with Nickel Boys. It's also about a residential school for children, non-white children, and the incredibly bad treatment they endured. So for a real bad time, you can watch those two movies together.
And I think also shares, it's really, I didn't really piece it together with Nickel Boys, but it also shares like Nickel Boys is kind of, I don't know, like very much more like art house artistic way of filmmaking. Daughters, you know, I think is very much in conversation with Sing Sing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree. Daughters, you know, it's the kind of movie that I knew was going to make me cry, and so I didn't want to watch it. And then I did. My boyfriend came home. I was halfway through, and I was just like truly just sobbing.
It's
sobbing I haven't experienced with a movie in a long time.
We should say it's about this program that's the woman who set it up is the co-director, where basically it allows incarcerated men to have a daddy-daughter dance with their daughters, and you kind of follow these young girls and their relationships with their fathers, and you meet them on the inside, and you watch the program they go through to be able to do this, and then it builds up to the inevitable moment where they have the joy of being reunited with their dads, and then having to go home at the end of the night, which like makes me tear up thinking about. Like it's so moving.
You know, and just how inhumane the prison system is. I mean, it's just like, you know, these are things that we sort of all know in theory, top line and broadly. And then you see a movie like this and it's just like, how do people live in this system? Like, how does the, you know, it's just, it's harrowing to me.
Yeah. No, people should absolutely watch it. Again, it's on Netflix. It's very easy to watch.
Yes. And Netflix also has, I think, Remarkable Life of Ibelin, which I still haven't seen.
No, me neither.
I need to. I mean, this for the short. It's really the short list for me are just like, okay, here are the next 20 movies you have to watch that you've been putting off. But I think that director's previous film was shortlisted, Painter and the Thief. And it's a really fascinating idea. It's about, you know, a kid who, I think, I can't remember what kind of disorder he had. He died, I think, in his early 20s, but was basically homebound, and his family kind of, this is how it's been pitched to me at least. His family are like mourning him and sort of mourning his lack of a life outside of his home until they realize that he was a gamer and like he had this incredible, like wide-reaching social circle. It just happened virtually on the internet. And I think like, I mean, that most of my friends are on the internet, so I completely relate to that. And so I'm sort of, that's another thing where I'm like, oh, that movie is going to crush me. I feel like I can't watch it yet. But that's always how the documentary, I think that's, you know, I think that's sometimes hard for documentarians to get their movies watched because sometimes their movies are really tough and it's hard to get audiences to sit through them when it's tough material.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say that, and like a good handful of these all premiered at Sundance in 2024, which is very well feather in the cap for the festivals that gears up for next year's version. So if you want a head start, go there. Before we move off documentaries, I want to hit shorts real quick. As usual, I don't know a lot about these. Catching up on the shorts is another project. But I was going to flag Seat 31, Zoe Zephyr, which is a New Yorker distributed short, I think. And it's about Zoe Zephyr, who I think is a Montana state rep, a trans woman who kind of recently defeated an effort to not let her use the bathroom that she wants to use, like that kind of thing. So when we were talking about Will and Harper, like that's another one that could really catch this moment of, you know, efforts to strip humanity away from trans people and be a good counterpoint to that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the shorts to me are very interesting, you know, coming from digital media, coming from New York media. That's where you see a lot of New Yorker, New York Times submissions. So it's a very interesting, it's an interesting place that they're power players in this very specific segment of the award space.
Yeah. For your consideration, Searchlight Pictures presenting James Mangold's A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. A Complete Unknown follows the singer-songwriter's meteoric rise, culminating in a groundbreaking and controversial performance that reverberates worldwide. Inspired by the true story, he defied everyone to change everything. The film co-stars Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, and Monica Barbaro. It's one of AFI's top 10 films of the year. Now nominated for the Critics' Choice and Golden Globes Awards, including Best Actor for Timothée Chalamet, Best Supporting Actor for Edward Norton, and Best Picture of the Year. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Okay, should we do makeup and hairstyling before we get into the music categories, which are always fun?
So I think this is like this. You always have one movie that you're just like, what is that? And here we have Waltzing with Brando, which I assume
do you know what it is?
I assume it's the movie in which Billy Zane plays Marlon Brando that I've just seen a picture of him in.
Wow, it
just
sure
on the internet.
is.
Yeah,
there's just this picture of him in full Brando in The Godfather.
Yeah.
It's scheduled for release in 2025, so it qualified.
Yeah,
in some way.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, but that is, it's a game that you have to pay to enter sometimes, and this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, presumably the makeup works incredible. I mean, you look at that picture of Billy Zane as Marlon Brando, looks like Marlon Brando.
It went viral for that reason. So I think that they definitely used that.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Again, I don't think that there are too many, other than that, I don't think there are really any surprises. And
I was glad to see Maria on there. Maria, like the costumes and the cinematography are the big standouts of that, but it does have really excellent makeup. I don't know how that competes with big old prosthetics like The Apprentice or Billy Perez or The Substance, but it is good work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that here we're going to see a lot of those. It's really heavy on the prosthetics this year.
Yeah.
And then like Beetlejuice, which I think is like fun because like that as a crafts movie, I think that movie was a big contender, and I'm happy to see it there.
Got him where it should have. I'll be rooting for A Different Man here because the prosthetics are great and are also kind of part of the plot of the movie as it moves on.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to see A Different Man and The Substance nominated together because those movies are very much in conversation with each other about.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of. That's what I love about this time of year is that when we're looking at the wide field of contenders, there are so many movies that just seem to have landed at the same time, just magically, that all kind of
talk to each
about
other.
The same thing. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, if they all lose to Wicked, with all due respect to the craft of Wicked, I'll be a little furious.
I mean,
there's different levels here.
Yeah, sure. They made Cynthia Erivo green.
They did.
And the hair looks good,
Everyone's hair looks good.
I mean,
everyone's makeup looks good.
The blonde that they got for Ariana Grande looks incredible. But when you compare that to Demi Moore sitting in a chair for 6 hours to be made into a crone, it's a little hard to justify.
To be made into a face to splat onto her Hollywood Walk of Fame star.
Exactly. And then The Apprentice. I mean, I finally saw it this week. It's a good, fine movie, and I'm always just sort of like, but who is this movie? Like, who wants this movie?
Yeah, great question. Sebastian Stan is very good.
He's very good, and Jeremy Strong is, and like the way their makeup was progressed, I thought was incredible, especially Roy Cohn.
Yeah, it's really good work.
It's this. I would say the best fake tan of the season. Jamie Lee Curtis coming in, runner up for Last Showgirl.
Okay, so moving on to the music, as we said, 20 original scores qualified, which is wild. Hans Zimmer's Dune Part 2 score deemed ineligible, which even though he won for the first one, so that's one crafts category. And yet Wicked. I knew that they had like made an effort to make Wicked qualify as original. I don't really know how that works. Like, that seems like a very complicated process. But
I feel like if Dune is not eligible because it's reusing too much of the first film, I don't understand how what is basically a Frankenstein score based on like motifs from the original show works. But I'm sure there's a technical reason that someone can explain, and I'm not the expert here on composing.
This is one of 3 categories where Alien Romulus pops up, which I maybe expected in visual effects if I had thought about it, but did not expect it in music and sound. So congratulations to them.
I wouldn't have expected a lot of these because, again, I think that this is a bigger list than normal. And I think, again, like, it's sort of ridiculous when you have a short list of 20 for a category that only 5 can get in.
Yeah.
Which, I think that there are some obvious ones here. I think that, like, Brutalist is a lock. Conclave's a lock.
Wild Robot?
I don't know. Maybe Wild Robot, yeah.
That score is fantastic in the Wild Robot.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Horizon American Saga Chapter 1.
Is that a good score? I still haven't seen that one.
I don't fucking know. I don't remember. But, I enjoyed it. It's a 3-hour television episode. But, if that could get... my Megalopolis dreams were crushed, of course. But if we could get...
What about Challengers? Do you have Challenger streams?
I mean, Challengers, I think it's going to get... I think if it gets anything, it'll be score maybe screenplay, but like I think score
let's
and
not count out the
are-
song. We'll get to the song.
Yeah.
Just Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have 2 Oscars, and if they won for one of these, they would have as many as Steven Spielberg. And I kind of just want to root for that outcome. Let's let that happen. I like Blink Twice is one I'm kind of curious about. Like, who is that composer? How did they wind up in here?
I don't remember it. Yeah.
I never saw Blink Twice, but yeah, every now and then there's a surprise. Like 688. Maybe as a coattails nomination from original song, which we can talk about now.
Well, one of my favorite subjects every year.
Diane Warren back in the mix for 6888.
If she gets nominated, this would be 17, I believe.
Yeah, and it's a weird song year. Like, I don't think there's an obvious frontrunner. I don't think there's a real juggernaut. So, like, in theory, this could be Diane Warren's year, but I still think it's not going to be.
Yeah. And I think that, I always joke that because I didn't have a full-time job this year, I was like, oh, God, I can't either interview Diane or set up the annual interview with Diane because we always do one at THR because she's always nominated.
Yep.
And it's sort of, even she sort of recognizes how ridiculous. I mean, she's very humble about it. She's like, it's still an honor. I love doing it. I love going. Like, it's almost... She said this like multiple times. She's like, it's almost more important to me than being nominated for a Grammy because it's a smaller group of people.
Yeah.
And
it's her club,
And
those
it's
are
her
her
club.
people.
And and I think that she just loves the game of it all. And she has the stamina to do it every year. I mean, God bless her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is kind of insane, truly, when you look at what songs of her have been nominated.
Yeah.
What didn't win, and then you look and see what they lost to, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, that was a tough one to beat. I mean, there are a couple I look back and I'm like, or like I'll rewatch an old movie and like it has a Diane Warren song in it, and I'm like, how did Because You Love Me not win?
Yeah, well, we
and
didn't
then you
know
go look,
what we had. Well, I maintain if we went back and gave it to her and Lady Gaga for that campus rape documentary song, because Sam Smith won that year for the Bond song that nobody really liked. Like, if we could just get that fixed.
Where he announced he was the first openly gay person to ever win an Oscar.
Yes, I believe that's how that went.
And Elton John was like, not only do I have one, I won that award.
Well, Elton John back in the mix this year for...
I mean, another person we can't really get rid of. He's always coming around.
Yep, he's gonna have a lot of documentaries about himself.
I mean, maybe this is how Better Man gets into the list. Have you
seen Better Man?
No, I haven't seen it. I mean, look,
a blast.
I still kind of don't want to admit it exists because it's so on paper insane. I just have never understood Robbie Williams as a cultural
you're American.
figure.
You're not.
Well, that too. I mean,
you're wrong nationality.
It's their Saturday Night Live. Robbie Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
So, basically.
I have a couple of things in this category that I really like. I really like Winter Coat from Blitz, a movie that I love and nobody else cares about. Obviously, Compress Repress from Challengers, which Luca Guadagnino has a writing credit on. So that would be a great... I think...
Okay.
Check me if I'm wrong. I don't think Luca's actually ever been Oscar nominated himself.
I don't think so either.
So like that could be his first nomination, which would be wild. But I do think the Lin-Manuel Miranda aspect of the Mufasa song and then the Moana 2 song that's nominated as well that he didn't write the music of, right. I don't think there's a real rivalry there, but it will be interesting to track.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to you as a parent of children and who, not only because of your job, but you're forced to watch these movies outside of work, where I can sort of be like, I don't need to watch Moana 2. But I've heard the Moana 2 songs are not
They're not quite on the level, although my kids might argue otherwise. I do think they're kind of, getting their hooks into kids in the same way that you might expect. But I haven't seen Mufasa yet, and I've also heard those songs are like not on the level of Moana 1 or Encanto. So I'm not sure anybody's bringing their best to this round.
I mean, it does sort of feel like, this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's Craven the Hunter era, where we're just really just scraping the bottom of the barrel to give him work. And I mean, it's good. It's always going to be good, but He
needs an Oscar. It's crazy that he doesn't have one. Like, it's going to happen eventually, but
I'm sure he feels the exact same way.
He may well. Like, the Moana song lost to La La Land, and we all have our feelings about that. So the time will come, but I'm not sure this is going to be the year.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of rush us to the finish line.
Yeah.
Let's get to sound and visual effects, which have a lot of overlap as usual. It's a lot of the blockbusters. Congrats to Deadpool and Wolverine. You've been given your due. I don't know that there's a ton of surprises in here. If there's anything action-y that didn't really make the cut, it kind of feels like the gang's all here.
Yeah, I mean, Twisters didn't get sound, which I think I saw a couple people Beast a little surprised about. I was actually, as someone who just rewatched Joker, fully ado. I don't know. I mean, this is the problem. I see everything, and then my partner at home, who doesn't go to the screenings, is like, everything comes on streaming. He's like, well, now I want to watch that.
Wow, you're a good partner for rewatching Joker.
I mean, it's always helpful. Sometimes it's beneficial. With Joker, I was sort of like, this is, why am I doing this? But I will say, like, I think the biggest bummer to me about Joker is that the cinematography and the sound are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And
it looks beautiful.
It's just, that hard work is just thrown out the window because the whole project is so tainted and stupid.
Yeah, I do feel like sound is going to be a musicals throwdown as opposed to action movies, because you've got a complete unknown in there, which is not a musical, but the musical performances in that movie are incredible.
Right. That's the one that I haven't seen that I need to see.
Yeah, there's something about the way that they do those songs is remarkable. And then obviously Emilia Perez and Wicked also in the mix there. So, and like Good for the Wild Robot also, like an animated film in the sound categories, that doesn't happen much. So that's nice to see. But like,
do you think anything could beat Dune in sound?
Emilia Perez or Wicked? I honestly, I would probably say Wicked. Like, I think if Wicked continues growing.
Yeah, Wicked has multiple quadrants because it's got musicals, but it's also an action film.
Yeah.
So,
well, and like, here's a sidebar for you. Like, I know more than a few people who are like, well, I guess Wicked's just going to win Best Picture. Like, where are you on that contention as of December 18th when we're recording?
As someone who has now seen Wicked twice and is completely just... I concede.
You've given in on Oz.
I think that, I think Ariana Grande is incredible. Cynthia Erivo's great. I think the two-part plan absolutely works. Yeah. I still have my notes about how it looks, and which is also why I think visual effects is not its strongest suit here.
I would agree. Yeah.
But it is, the editor told me it was like 2,500 visual effects shots. So when you're talking in a bake-off, that is something that those people would know best. So I don't know.
The narrative in visual effects that I've clued into so far is that the Apes movies have never won a visual effects Oscar.
And neither have Marvel. Marvel's never won, I don't think Marvel's ever won a visual effects.
Sounds right. I mean, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I did not see. I have no real affection for it. But like those Apes movies, what they have accomplished with visual effects in those Apes movies is very remarkable. So I feel like that would be
two Apes movies here. We also have Better Man.
Better Man. Don't forget the Apes in Gladiator 2 also. Very substantial part of that movie.
Are there any apes in, you haven't seen Mufasa yet, but maybe there are apes in Mufasa.
I think. So,
oh, yes. Yeah. Wow.
The apes running the world in this visual effects
What if we got 4 ape-focused... Oh, and Wicked, Flying Monkeys.
Yep.
What if there are 5 movies about monkeys?
Beat us to this. I want to give him credit, but yes.
Of course he did.
The monkey madness of visual effects. I mean, I just think we have to make it happen. Like, why not seize that opportunity?
Why not?
Yeah.
Sorry, Dune.
Well, I'm going to skip the animated and live action shorts because, again, we're just kind of out of our depth. But talking about the shorts is always very fun when the time comes. Sometimes I'd wait till after the nominations are out.
I will say the only thing I'm surprised, an Almost Christmas Story, David Lowery's short. Because, again, it's like, there is a contention in the shorts world because Wes Anderson won last year for a movie that was funded by Netflix, a huge production, that like the shorts really are a place where up-and-coming directors are supposed to be getting their due. And when you have a Disney Alfonso Cuarón-produced short film by a director who's done like 6 features at this time, I think that there may have been a backlash to that, which is why it sort of didn't land.
But then, sometimes you get like that apple, the boy, the horse, the mole, whatever that movie was that like was the least interesting of all those animated short nominees, and because it had big names behind it, it got in there. So there's an interesting push pull there.
Too. I mean, there's people who actually recognize that book, which is it's Hollywood after all.
I personally am excited to someday see the animated short film Yuck! Exclamation mark of all the just title alone I was looking at. That's the one that got
is also
interest.
A good title. That really speaks to me.
I mean, the titles when they read them out on nominations morning, whoever's starlet is standing next to the Academy president at 5:30 in the morning.
I know there's always something. It's just like my dumb ass.
My year of dicks.
Yeah, my year of dicks.
Still respect my year of dicks. Well, so Tyler, based on the short list, we're saying we had our assignments. What's your holiday viewing assignment after all of of this as we wrap this up?
I have a lot of docs to watch. Oh my gosh. I like literally wrote down a handwritten list of like literally what I have
I can
left.
hear the paper crinkling.
I mean, I have a lot of docs to watch. The ones I'm excited about are Union, soundtrack to a coup d'etat. It's the most embarrassing thing I could do. Coup d'etat. A Remarkable Life of Ibelin, Queendom, which the trailer freaked me out, so I'm a little hesitant to watch it. But and then I'm not really an animated person, but I will watch Flow because it's now
watch Flow.
It seems like the movie to beat, and if it's also getting a second submission, But I've heard I need to watch Kneecap. I need to watch Armand's Universal Language.
Is fun.
Yeah, I've heard
some of these international
really
titles can feel intimidating, and Kneecap seems fun.
And it's like an Irish musical about rap. So
great.
Yeah, and I think it's, I would love to see more Irish language films out in the world.
Yeah, I think the first one got nominated like a year or two ago.
Yeah, it was The Quiet Girl, The Silent Girl. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting, it's not what we think about when we think about international, but I think it still counts. So how about you? What do you need to catch up on?
I've got my eye on, just out of title alone, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. How can that be a bad movie? I have international titles to catch up on. I have friends telling me to watch Universal Language for months and months. I'm going to get there. Kneecap, Vermiglio are on there as well. Dahomey, obviously, that's 65 minutes and gets you 2 categories taken care of. So it's like some mostly international and definitely some docs in there too. So it sounds like we got a lot of educating ourselves to do.
Yeah, we might have to share screener contacts, maybe, because these are always the harder ones to track down. I feel like
there's definitely some trickier ones to track down. As we were saying, for people listening, there's stuff on Disney Plus, on Netflix, a lot of these titles on there. You can find some shorts you can watch online. Get to Googling. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff out there for everybody.
And a lot of the streamers, I think, pick up a lot of the shortlisted titles.
Yeah,
I think
Netflix will often put some shorts on there, which is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Tyler, have an excellent holiday and happy viewing ahead. And we'll catch up with you again very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah. This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. You can get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, where you can watch a video version of these conversations, or on Apple or anywhere else you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.